You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. The Options Insider Radio Network is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC.
Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
Welcome back to Options Insider Radio, the interview program here on the old network where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of options and derivatives and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-interesting, at least we think so, Options Insider Radio Network. We're coming at you once again from the Securities Traders Association 2018 conference down here in scenic and sunny Washington, D.C. And I'm pleased to be joined by my next guest here, who's an old friend of the network, even though she hasn't been on in a little bit. Maybe since OIEC, maybe. I don't know. I have to go back. They all start to blend together after a while. She is Cathy Clay, the Global Head of Information Solutions over there at Cboe BATS. Cathy, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's the first time we've ever talked at STA DC.
It would be because I've never been down here before. They've been bugging me for years. Come check it out. Come check it out. And I thought, well, let's try it. Let's give it a try and see who we can talk to down here. And it has been an impressive array of different people. I mean, you don't usually play solely in the equities vertical. Obviously, there clearly are options players here, and even crypto has been in here already. So it's all assets down here at the STA event this year. But yeah, interesting event. We definitely like to check it out. We don't get down to DC as often as we probably should, so kind of interesting stuff at work there. Speaking of interesting stuff, you just got off the options panel down here. We unfortunately weren't able to record it like we like to do for a lot of our conference, just all the fun of releases. They don't want to deal with that at ST. I don't really blame them. But what were some of the interesting takeaways from your conversation you guys just had on the options panel?
Well, I think first and foremost, because the audience is a lot of equities participants, we tackle sort of the concept of CAT, the Consolidated Audit Trail project that will soon be impacting the options players as well. And so there was, a conversation about what that means as we start implementing CAT in the options space, what the challenges will be and what the nuances will be. And so that was, I think, a good topic because right after us was the CAT panel itself. And so I think talking about CAT in the options space leading into the real CAT panel was good for the audience to listen to.
Always the sexiest of topics, the CAT. We've had the thesis guys
I'm
on the network.
I'm saving the sexiest topics for later, Mark.
Actually, it's funny. I've been talking to some of the people here who actually went and attended the event on Capitol Hill a few days ago where they went and briefed the senators and congressmen. And they said even to their credit, even somewhat, shall we say, in the weeds topics like CAT. The congressmen were interested. They were relatively informed. These are things that are kind of somewhat deep minutia, and they seem like they actually had an interest. So I guess that shows that maybe things are ticking up over there on the Hill, at least when it comes to some of these hardcore market structure type of events. You made an interesting, I got a chance to catch some of the panel. You made an interesting comment that kind of caught my ear, because we always talk here on the network and a lot of our guests about what I term the fire hose of data that is the options market. You got this full opera hose just coming at you. I think they said today in the panel over 1 million plus strikes being listed, which doesn't surprise me at all. Sounds small, actually. But just an enormous amount of data. And people have been on here for years on this network just railing, like, oh my God, the data, how do we do it? What do we do? Quote mitigation, et cetera, so on and so forth. But you made an interesting comment today. You said you think the technology has kind of outpaced that now. We're at a place where that massive amount of data maybe isn't the conversation stopper that it used to be. Let us know. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think we've hit that point where maybe the technology has finally caught up to the fire hose?
To be sure, the topic of big data, which I think was always headlining conferences for the past several years, I would be surprised if you see big data as a headliner at a conference this year. And I think the reason is what you touched on, is that the technology that's available for us today actually is finally sufficient to handle all of the data that we generate in the options market. So previously, in years past, that was not the case. It was just a task in and of itself to try to harness all of the data that was coming out of the options markets. That has changed. I mean, technology innovation, as you know, is advancing at rapid pace. And today, the conversation really isn't about housing big data. In fact, the example I gave on the panel was that several years ago, when we would try to process the entire Opera feed for repurposing to clients, it would be a T+3 type of endeavor. It took that many days of reprocessing to process that feed. We are able today to process the entire Opera feed within a few hours after the market closed. And so you can tell that the big data, compute speed, all of that has really benefited our industry. So big data is not necessarily the issue anymore, housing it, storing it, et cetera. The issue is, what do we do with the big data now? And so I think the conversation has shifted from what is a big data problem to how do we now use this data in a way that is advantageous for our clients, for our businesses, et cetera.
So you're not as concerned, it's not as front of mind for you anymore, things like quote mitigation or strike mitigation, these aren't maybe as pressing issues as they were a couple of years ago?
Well, in terms of quote and strike mitigation, I think that we have to divorce that topic from the big data conversation, because certainly quote mitigation and strike selection are today important topics. And there was really good conversation on the panel today about why that was. And so, we had a conversation about, well, if 80% of the strikes in the options market are not being traded, then why are we having to quote them? But it's less a concern to house that data. In other words, it's not a big data problem. It's an inefficiency problem. It's why are we forcing our liquidity providers to quote in all of those strikes when nobody's trading them? Because in an event where those bids or offers get lifted simultaneously and they're quoting a ton of them, then they have real risk to their capital. But it's not the big data that's the issue. It's more of efficient capital allocation and efficiencies of the market, of showing the end client, for example, hundreds of strikes when only 2+ at the monies are trading. You shouldn't have all of those strikes. So I'm optimistic, and I think the panel's sense too was that we're going to come to a sensible resolution about how to properly pick and list strikes and delist strikes. So I think that's going to happen.
I think the key there, I think, is the delisting. That's the issue that seems to be, whether it's in penny pilot, removing names from the penny pilot, or delisting strikes, that seems to be where the hang-up. People can add things all day long. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But removing things
right.
seems to be
it's always that pesky lot of open interest that exists in a strike.
I trade these 1 delta puts all the time. This is my thing, and you got to leave them on. Yeah, you're right. But for the liquidity providers out there, all these random 80% of strikes, a lot of that just represents risk, right? They only get filled in there. They only trade in there when it's something that's picking them off. So you're right. For a lot of them, maybe mitigating that data aside, just from a risk and like you mentioned, efficiency is probably a welcome change.
Yeah, because what we don't know is would spreads be tighter if there weren't so many strikes being quoted? I mean, I don't think we know the answer to that. I don't think we have the empirical data to answer that. But your gut feeling would say, yes, if I'm a market maker and I'm quoting in this particular name and I can reduce the amount of quotes I'm sending out by 70%, you would think that might have a positive impact on spread width.
Yeah, nice to see some empirical data on that. Maybe the SEC should start a pilot for that, right? You know,
strike
mitigation, strike mitigation pilot, a strike delisting, a quote mitigation pilot.
You obviously did not hear Chris Concannon's fireside chat first thing this morning, where he took issue with a lot of the pilots that they're being forced to do. So.
The pilot usually implies temporary. In the options space, it's been a decade now plus of the quote unquote penny pilot, and it's still a pilot. So yeah, the pilot term I think has lost some of its significance. Well, obviously, Cathy, you hang your hat day to day over there now as the head of information solutions, but your baby is LiveVol. I'm sure that still holds a fondness in your heart over there at Cboe. I know you guys have made some upgrades over there. We use it all the time. I'll be using it in about an hour when I'm doing our option block show from here. So walk us through some of the tweaks, some of the improvements, some of the upgrades you guys have made over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. LiveVol is still near and dear to my heart. It was the way that we entered Cboe through the acquisition in August of 2015. And it's been just amazing to see the impact that LiveVol has had on the Cboe's ability to really produce a really elegant market data offering, both for internal use and for external commercialization of the products. And as I think you're referring to our newly released LiveVol Pro JS version, which is a really nice HTML implementation of LiveVol Pro. And LiveVol Pro has been around for a number of years, and it was really the first analytics platform that brought together all sorts of information that at the time market makers needed to make decisions about trading. So we came up with proprietary implied volatility statistics and normalized that volatility over certain horizons, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day. You can think of it as a VIX-like calculation for Apple, Google, all underlying equities, and that was a big thing at the time. Now we've expanded the product offering to really talk about term structure, because now at Cboe with our futures offerings, it's important to really educate people about the term structure and how it looks today versus historical, how it might be changing. We've also added a lot of skew analysis. So you can look at skew by moneyness, and you can configure the type of skew you want to look at. So if you want to look at what does the 20 delta call look like against the 10 delta put, over time, you can see that relationship and hold that relationship constant and see that move. And so these are some of the things that we've put in there, along with a ton more historical data. I think we used to have 2 years of historical data. Now we go back to 10 years, so our charting is much improved. Our implied vol to historical vol, going back that length of time, is much improved. We've added a new earnings analysis tab where you can actually see historically what the implied move was expected to be as indicated by the options market and what the actual realized move was over a number of years. And then a live look at what the options market is implying that expected move to be as a company heads into earnings. So that's we've gotten a great feedback on that component. So just a brand new look and feel, plus a lot of new studies embedded for the user. Yeah,
I actually feel bad because it's a lot of stuff I've been requesting, like the HTML5 responsiveness, all these kind of things that I want to get to configure your own UI. And I actually got an email from you guys the other day, like, how come you haven't switched yet? And it's because I still use the old one because, quite frankly, my use case is a little specific. I need stuff quickly for shows. And so I've just got it down in my head. I've been using it so many years, the old design. I can find stuff really quickly. I haven't had time to reconfigure the new one to my needs yet. So I'm still the Luddite using the old one, even though I like all the changes you made to the new one. And I will switch over one of these days when I have time to sit down and actually configure it the way that I need it. Right now I need to go bam, 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 and it's just the old one still works for me for that perspective.
I'm going to send someone to help you, Mark. Yeah. We're going to get you set up.
I might need someone to sit there with me and let's just configure it really quick. So
and by the way, you're what we call a non-first adopter.
Yes. In this case, I am not in that sense.
But we thank you for using it in general.
And you also have things like the DataShop. I know you rolled out kind of the bespoke data offering not too long ago over there. How's that going? Yeah,
the DataShop has continued to just revolutionize the way we've sold market data. And what we've seen and we've been really happy about, especially in the backdrop of this larger conversation about the increasing cost of market data. The SEC is holding a roundtable next month on the topic, and there's just a lot of conversation happening in the marketplace about how expensive market data has gotten and how onerous that is to the capital markets, capital formation. And I look at something like the DataShop where it couldn't be more opposite. It couldn't be more the case that we've taken something that was a fire hose approach, as you say, very expensive, because you had to buy a large amount of data, even if you only wanted a small snippet of that data for your personal use, for your analysis, for your strategy backtesting, whatever. You had to buy a big fire hose of data, and that was expensive. But now with the DataShop, and why we created it was because we knew that there was a demand for people to have what they wanted, in the way that they wanted, in increment they wanted. And it is not uncommon for us to see folks coming onto the DataShop and creating accounts and putting a couple of symbols in their shopping cart with, maybe they want to see quotes and trades every, 86 seconds. And they want to see Greeks with that and
That's me.
that.
I love my 86-second intervals. Right. That's how I look at everything.
Right. But is that customizable? And then, you'll check out and, purchase price will be like $10. So, I really like to point to that as an advance in technology that actually really helped the end investor, the end client, to get data at a very reasonable cost and not an onerous delivery as well. So the DataShop has been just fantastic. We continue to add new data sets, new proprietary data sets from Cboe. We will continue to add new data sets. So that's going to grow in our e-commerce model of offering as much data as we can in one location for the people that have accounts there. But most importantly on DataShop, we've just released an offering of APIs. So when you think about the components of LiveVol Pro, each one of those components can be consumed with an API. So when I brought up the earnings analysis component, for example, if you were a vendor and you wanted to actually put that earnings component into your own software, into your own execution platform, you can now go right onto the DataShop and load that API in your cart and check out and bring that into your own platform. So we definitely have the motto in my group as, build once, leverage multiple times. So we're going to use our data to build analytics, and then we're going to offer those analytics through a customized Flex API that other people can bring into their own workflow. As you know, the desktop real estate is really valuable. The last thing people want is to have to add another platform. So we're trying to make it very easy for people to, a la carte, pick what's meaningful to them in their particular business model and consume that via RESTful API right into their platform.
Yeah, I imagine there's a large subset of the audience out there that if you don't come to them with an API, they're like, okay, thanks, but no thanks. That's how I need to access all my data. So you're right. You kind of need that. It's almost like table stakes these days, right, to be able to play with a certain element of the space. Well, you mentioned LiveVol, you mentioned the DataShop. What else kind of falls under the rubric of information solutions? Is Vest part of that? What else is part of that?
Yeah, Vest is not part of that, but I'd like to talk to that a little bit because I am on the board of Vest, and so I know a little bit of that story. Information solutions is really the combination of three separate businesses. It's the LiveVol business, which it's the data and analytics, married with the execution services business. So right now we have two platforms, Pulse and Silex. We recently purchased Silex back in November of last year, so almost a year old now. And then the third part is our index calculation services. So we brought these three businesses together, which were beforehand, slightly fragmented, kind of operated in silos, and we had this realization that, really what's fundamentally driving all of these businesses is client-facing technology that helps them access Cboe markets. Whether on the data and analytics side, whether it was something that helped them get to a trade in VIX or SPX or help understand our markets better, we were going to focus on delivering that in an analytics component. And then the execution, that direct ties to our floor. So Silex and Pulse offer some special execution capabilities that really augment their experience at Cboe, whether it's connections to the floor environment, what have you, whether it's combination orders that really highlight how to put trades together, cross-asset trades, and execute them elegantly in a single order ticket. Those are things that are really important to our end clients. And then finally, index services. You can't point to a better business that educates people about Cboe prop products than the option strategy benchmark indices that we build. The buy right indices that we have, the different flavors of those, the put right indices, the condor indices, really giving people an opportunity to benchmark to a strategy that we've defined and calculate over a period of time. So the underpinnings of all those three businesses is the data. So LiveVol, again, LiveVol has really become our internal single repository of data that we're leveraging across these businesses. So when you think of my group, I guess the way I think of it is anything that's not touching the matching engine.
Okay.
But client-facing technology is in my group.
Just speaking of technology too, what's it been like for you, maybe personally? Obviously, you come to Cboe from a technology bent. Now that they've merged with BATS, a much more tech-focused entity, what's it been like for you, maybe internally there? Maybe not working with this new BATS team, which is obviously much more in your wheelhouse, much more in the tech side of the space. Must have been interesting for you guys over there.
Yeah, I'd have to say that the biggest takeaway I have with being a part of the way BATS builds and maintains and supports technology is a true appreciation for the discipline that philosophy brings to how Cboe now develops, maintains, and supports technology. Coming from a fintech background, you're duct taping some things. You're trying to get to market. You're paying less attention to maybe the longevity of the solution, and certainly we weren't regulated, as an SRO is. So watching and being a part now of a process that is highly regulated and so has to meet a lot of different demands. The process that Chris Isaacson has put in place at Cboe now, I'm just amazed at how much work gets done in a very disciplined cycle that everyone now follows. And maybe there was a little bit of a painful point for people to get on board in the beginning because it was new. But I don't think you won't find a champion for that disciplined process that we now have. And I feel it's a huge competitive advantage for us, just that process itself.
And I know you guys are obviously undergoing a big tech migration, tech overhaul over here. You say you don't touch the matching engine, but you're the tech representative from Cboe here. How's that process going? I know it was expected to unfold in the coming months. Is it everything on pace there?
Yeah, I mean Chris's team has hit every milestone that they have put out, whether it was the migration of the futures exchange first. C1, which is our big exchange, will migrate next November. But I have all the confidence in the world, and I can say that because I've watched this disciplined process and how it unfolds every Monday with meetings throughout the week, the unit acceptance testing, the QA, the rolling up of code, automatically. It's such an elegant, efficient process that I would be shocked if we missed any deadline that Chris Isaacson sets forth.
Obviously we're here at a securities event, but one of the hot topics on everybody's mind is crypto. We just had a crypto guest in here not right before you. So it's inescapable, even at a securities event. You can't escape crypto. I'm curious for you guys, from your perspective as kind of a data provider, data vendor, there's a lot of opportunities, I would say, maybe in the crypto space, maybe a lot of challenges as well. What are your thoughts on crypto and maybe what you obviously have the futures as well, so you have that data. But what are your thoughts on the space in general, maybe some opportunities you guys see for your team there?
Well, personally, I'm a huge optimist for the crypto space. I really think that crypto and blockchain in general will have a lasting and impactful impact in our markets. I think we were the first exchange to list a Bitcoin future contract, and so I think that speaks to the support of the Cboe management and wanting to be a part of this asset class. We have plans to list an Ether future. Certainly we have all of the crypto data on DataShop that comes through our marketplace, as well as Gemini. And Gemini, if listeners don't know, Gemini is our partner in our crypto offering. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss in New York have a really great, we think, regulatory framework and model for the crypto space. We truly believe they are ahead of the game in asking for regulation, creating a self-regulatory body. And so we feel, as Cboe and highly regulated ourselves, very comfortable partnering with folks like Gemini. And so we use Gemini data and auction data in order to settle those Bitcoin futures. But we're not exactly happy with the volume that we're getting just now. But we know it's in the early innings. Inning one potentially. So we're being very patient and trying to be very thoughtful about how we want to expand that crypto offering. And I can tell you, in my group, we will be coming out with some crypto indices based on some data, Gemini and otherwise, that we think will be impactful in the market as well.
You mentioned the volume. No, it's certainly been surprising to me. If you had asked me to pick which horse would be ahead in the race right now, the OneCoin or the Fivecoin, just from a listed futures perspective, I think everyone was picking the OneCoin. The marketplace has played out a little bit differently, which has been a surprise to me. Has that been a little bit of a surprise to you that the marketplace, at least for the time being, seems to be favoring a much larger, meatier contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think the CME as a futures exchange just naturally has a wider breadth of participants, with their FCAs and all of those futures traders are naturally going to be more familiar with CME. So I think we had a little bit of a headwind there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think one of our big advantages is the notional on our contract, which is 5 times smaller than the contract on CME. And so might invite, a smaller player, but one might conclude that because the CME contract is trading more, that maybe it's the big institutional ones that aren't afraid to play in that notional game. And so that might be the case. I'm not sure. I think we have some work to do just in general to get more participants, to get more of the participants in the capital markets engaged with allowing trades on the futures market in the crypto space, looking again at the margin component of that and the obstacles and friction that brings into the market. But, we're not giving up. We may be behind a little bit in the race, but we certainly, certainly don't intend to stay there.
Still early in the race. Hopefully the race isn't done yet. Hopefully we have a lot more products and things going to hit the tape, not just 2 futures, as fun as they may be. Yeah. We want a lot more out there. And, all our audience today just want Bitcoin options. So I'll spare you from having to speculate on that. We've already heard enough of times when that's coming out or not coming out, shall we say. But, you mentioned it, and a lot of our guests have kind of touched on a similar refrain there that, there's a lot of institutional interest in crypto. It's just not ready for prime time yet from an institutional perspective. We see fragmentation across a legion of different venues. The data is sometimes, there's still trade throughs all the time. There's custody issues, there's all sorts of things. The liquidity isn't quite there yet. All sorts of issues that, that are maybe kind of old school that have been solved in a lot of other markets that are kind of new again in the crypto space, which makes it both exciting and maybe a little bit challenging. What do you think we can do to help try to get some of the attendees at an event like this, maybe get them to play in the crypto space going forward, make it more palatable for institutions?
I think you hit it right on the head there with, we are early on in this asset class, and a lot of the just expected infrastructure and workflows just aren't there for crypto. We don't have a consolidated feed for crypto. I know there's companies out there that are forming consolidated feeds.
Just had one in here a little while ago. There's quite a few people tilting at that window now.
Right. I don't think it's a big exercise in imagination. I think there's a playbook for how a brand new asset class gets to maturity, gets to the institutional clients. Those pieces just take a while to get put in place. But there are many companies, as you know, that are tackling each one of those fragmented areas of the trade life cycle. All the way, from pre-trade, through the trade, middle office, back office, what does that look like? And we'll get there. It's not a new exercise. It's just basically people trying to solve it in maybe somewhat new ways, with new entrants into the game trying to solve the problem, as well as existing entrants who are well-versed in how to do this, but maybe battling some legacy technology systems and things like that. Not to mention the regulatory overhang of being in this space just isn't crystal clear for a lot of players either. So time is our friend here. We will definitely get this figured out.
I think you just touched on what to me is one of the most fascinating aspects of this space. It's the intermingling of what you just mentioned, these kind of new entrants. These, crypto was kind of born in, the West Coast tech kind of somewhat libertarian movement out there of let's make some new ecosystem. We don't need this old financial services. We can do it ourselves, make it new, disintermediate, all this kind of stuff. And now it's coming into contact with, in the case of Chicago, a very experienced risk management financial services venue who's taken to crypto it's been amazing really to watch the uptake in crypto just in the last year in the Chicago trading community. But you have these kind of two mindsets coming together, sometimes meshing, sometimes butting heads. The experienced risk management, financial services mindset, which is maybe a little bit more grounded, a little bit more realistic. Then you have the crypto, solution to all problems kind of mindset. And it's been fascinating to watch those two come together. You obviously started your career out in the West Coast in the tech scene, but also in the option scene. Now you're here in Chicago. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on these two kind of mindsets coming together and maybe what we're seeing being born as a result?
I think you bring a good point, because there is a debate for sure among the benefits of decentralization, which the hardcore techies in the crypto space will always want to maintain, and then the benefits of centralization. And if you look at the capital markets today, everything is pretty much centralized. Exchanges are centralized, firms are centralized. And so the idea of decentralization in the capital markets, it may have its place. It may be more like peer-to-peer transactions. And, you're going to give up some things that centralized markets offer you. For example, margin and leverage. If everything on a peer-to-peer model is settled immediately, that in and of itself means you are not able to have margin. You're not able to have leverage. And so, we have to think about what that means for a centralized market and the impact on volumes and trading and so forth that would happen if we actually adopted a really decentralized model. Plus, there's a ton of inefficiencies in a decentralized model. And then, of course, there are those that say the centralized model are flawed because of the control aspects, et cetera. There's always people that actually pull all the levers, and so there's that debate. I don't expect that debate to be resolved. I think there will be a philosophical difference between both of those for some time. I think there will be a winner eventually, for sure. And people will vote with where they're placing their trades and where they're doing business. And so we'll know. I would have to say that I think it's going to be very difficult for the decentralized camp to knock off the centralized camp because there's just so much incentive built in around centralization of processes about trading, about clearing, et cetera.
As you mentioned before, if you want to get the institutions involved, you need some degree of centralization. They don't want to deal with wallets, and they don't want all this, this kind of crazy nonsense that goes on in the crypto space. But at the same time, maybe some of that aspirational element of that crypto mindset is good for the financial services world. So I think there's an interesting melding of the minds, to borrow a Star Trek term, that's going on here, which is kind of fascinating to watch. And we're seeing startups already kind of emerging from that have interesting perspectives on the space, which I think is really fascinating. It's certainly been a shot in the arm for the Chicago trading community. I mean, for years we've seen a lot of guys, as the floors have somewhat wound down a little bit, looking for the next thing, the next iteration where they can apply that skill set, and crypto has landed like a bomb in that space, and it's been fascinating to watch. So
it really has. I mean, you asked about the West Coast Chicago sort of connection, but there's definitely a migration happening. Coinbase is bringing their matching engine technology and team to Chicago. I think Kraken is doing the same. I anticipate that will be a theme as those companies realize that a lot of the talent for trading and matching engines, trading systems, really resides in Chicago, and so. And not to mention the cost of living is a lot less than San Francisco.
Yes, you've experienced that yourself.
Yes, and continue to. So I think we'll see that migration continue to happen. But I love the fact that Chicago is really becoming a hotbed of crypto and blockchain, and is really active in that conversation.
It is funny. It has been a second win for the trading. Who would have thought, a year or two ago, that Chicago would emerge as this hub for crypto trading in particular, and yet it certainly has. And so, yeah, you're right. It has been fascinating to watch, and hopefully we see some interesting things coming out of that. Speaking of interesting things, Cathy, we touched on a lot of fun stuff, but if there's anything we left out, or maybe you want to leave our audience with a little bit of a tease of what's coming down the pike from the Information Solutions Group over there at Cboe, now is the time, madam. The floor is yours.
Well, I think, I guess in closing, I'd make one observation and one prediction, and this touches on my businesses because of the vast amount of data that we work with. But it's under the headline of machine learning, and one of the observations that I would make is that machine learning is really prevalent in much of our trading ecosystem right now, but it's really concentrated, at least right now, in regulatory and surveillance applications. And that makes sense. The prediction is that in 5 to 10 years, machine learning will be so prevalent in our industry that those that aren't able to adapt and adopt to analytics that come out of the machine learning will probably fail to survive. And so, when you think about the first observation, it makes sense, because when you're feeding a model, a deep learning model, data, like if you take a question, what is spoofing? You can identify data that was spoofing and say, feed that into the model and say, this is spoofing. And you're supervising the learning of that model. And you can feed it data that wasn't spoofing and say, this wasn't spoofing. And so that has already been done. It's been very easy to train data, to train models to know what is spoofing, for example. So that's exactly why we're seeing machine learning really ubiquitous across regulatory and surveillance systems. What is less easy to do, but will happen in 5 to 10 years, what's less easy to do is ask a question like, what is a good trade? And how do you train your model to identify a good trade? Because I may say, hey, Mark, what's a good trade? And you would say, well, a good trade is where you buy something and it goes up. And I would say, well, how do you know you made a good trade? And you would say, because I sold it and I had money. And I would say, well, what if you sold that stock or option a week earlier? Or what if you held on to it a week later? Or what if you bought another asset that didn't quite perform as well, but reduced the Sharpe ratio of your portfolio. Was that the better trade? So this is where we're at in terms of idea generation and trading using all of the data we have. But there's thousands of quants out there right now that are trying to get to that right question, to come to how to get to the best trade. And it's my belief that those questions will get formulated, and once we have the good questions to ask, the data is already there. The algorithms will kick in naturally. And if you're not a part of getting that sort of systematic analysis, it's going to be very difficult to compete in a few years, because if you're a little bit late on price, a little bit late on decision, a little bit late on getting out, less has disrupted our industry before. And I always think back to, like the late 1990s, heading into electronic trading of the options markets, and there was people that were basically saying there's no way the pits are going away, right? No way, because where is price discovery going to happen? And I would argue today that there's a lot of people that don't want to hear what I'm saying about 5 to 10 years. But in 5 to 10 years, if you're an investor, if you're a firm, and you're not employing some machine learning, your competitors will be, and it will be very difficult to compete. And so in my group, we just hired our first data scientist, and we're spending a lot of time thinking about how to leverage the data that's at our disposal to provide more intelligence, more information to our clients. It's a big focus.
I like that. I said leave them with a tease. You left them with terror, but it's a tease also at the same time. So it's both tease and terror. I like that. That's
if it's terror, you're talking to the people that don't want to listen to that. There's other people out there that are high-fiving.
Well, Cathy, I'm glad we could have you on. A lot of interesting stuff going on over there in the Cboe Information Solutions Group, and we'll look forward to seeing how all this plays out in the marketplace in the coming months, or maybe in the case of the latter, 5 to 10 years.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Keep up the good work.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/The Options Insider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.